Good evening, everyone. If you'd go ahead and find your seat and we will get started. My name is Father Daniel Chucci. I'm the pastor here at Most Precious Blood. Just a show of hands, if you come here for Sunday Mass, Sunday worship, go ahead and raise your hand. Great. If you're just from the neighborhood and you got our flyer, go ahead and raise your hand. Wonderful. We are very happy to have you. You're our neighbors, and we love our neighbors. So thank you for being here. Tonight started off just from our recent efforts on taking care of those who find themselves in a situation of homelessness. And so we as a campus have taken some infrastructural changes to just augment some safety features around here. But also, we're taking this two-pronged approach of safety and compassion. And so some of the language that I've been using is, for those who are using our property for kind of their own upkeep, we're trying to help them, but then help them get to where they need to be. And so, but truly help them. And so we've been partnering with Catholic Charities. We're bringing in an organization that has dedicated themselves to interfacing, to building relationships with those who find themselves in a state of homelessness. And so thank you for being here tonight. One last just brief reflection. When I was a deacon, I've been a priest now for 5 years. When I was a deacon, that's the year before priestly ordination, I was bringing Holy Communion to a couple, and in my encountering them, I found one of them was blind and the other one was very grumpy, and they were kind of hard to interact with for me. And I remember taking this back to my spiritual director and just kind of complaining a little bit of just the difficulty of those interactions for me on a weekly basis. And my spiritual director looked at me and said, "Daniel, we are all blind and grumpy." And that's always made a really deep impression on me since then, that whatever I see as a problem in somebody else, more than likely I too have that problem. And so just something for our own reflection here tonight. I think on this side of the grave, each of us also is living with a certain element of homelessness. It may not be houselessness, but this side of heaven, I would say that something's missing in each of us as well. And so, knowing that this world is not fully our home, I think there's a certain empathy that we can have just out of the spiritual poverty of being fellow human beings in a broken world, of experiencing on a spiritual level our own element of homelessness. And so I invite Elizabeth Subcheck, who's one of the parents of our, she's got 3 kids in our school, and I invite her forward. She's going to offer her own reflections from her own experience in working with this population. And then we will have Connor Boyle, who will follow. And then we have Christ in the City, who is a ministry that works directly with this population. So thank you for your attention.
All right, hi everyone. It's good to be with you here with you tonight. Go that far. Put my papers down. Is that better? Great. My name is Elizabeth Subcheck. My family has been parishioners here at MPB for about 2 years now. We moved from Chicago in the middle of COVID and spent our first year getting to know many of you through the Zoom masses at the parish. My husband Kevin and I have 3 children at MPB school, a 13-year-old boy, an almost 11-year-old girl. The almost is very important, she tells me, and a 6-year-old girl. I'd like to talk with you tonight about my own journey in approaching homelessness through judgment, setting boundaries, and seeking dignity. But before we do that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself to set the stage. My background is in social work and public health, fields very relevant to serving the homeless. I spent my summers, Saturdays, and practicums in college and grad school in the St. Louis housing projects, in federally qualified health centers, and in the DCFS office reading with kids while their parents had appointments. I worked with the St. Vincent de Paul Central Office, referring people to resources. I volunteered at the Catholic Worker House and the Juvenile Detention Center. I was frequently approached by people, mostly men, on the streets asking for bus money. Sometimes I had money to give, and sometimes I did not. I directly saw the poverty, lack of quality education, and lack of access to mental health resources, including for substance abuse, that contribute to higher rates of homelessness. It's easy to hear that list and get discouraged. Solving for homelessness requires a lot of time, money, and energy at the national level, state and local levels. I don't feel like I know enough about what policies would help or where money would be most effective, but I do have day-to-day interactions, like all of us, where I have the opportunity to be the hands and feet of Christ. And that's where I'll focus tonight. By show of hands, how many of you have seen individuals on the street corners begging for money? And by show of hands, how many of you have had an experience that was less than ideal with one of those people? I know that I have had many, many interactions that weren't what I had hoped. For example, I've had a mentally ill homeless person try to rob me at a gas station. I've had someone tell me that the female friend I was sitting with looked like a man, continued to say insulting things, and then asked me for bus money. I've had someone say that the change I had to give was useless. And my immediate response is to judge, to say that person was strung out, that they're going to use that money to get drunk, that they were not grateful enough. It feels bad in those circumstances. I feel bad in those circumstances. I'm coming from a genuine place, and it did not go to plan. So what was my plan? Usually something like providing temporary assistance and feeling good about my charitable choice. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me, right? And feeling good about our choice is a valid desire. Probably one of many of us in this room have on a daily basis, driving past 25 in Colorado, or Yale, or Hamden. But Jesus calls us to go a step further, to provide without judgment, to give without expectation of gratefulness in return. Let's sit with that for a minute and recall the story of the 10 lepers that Jesus healed. One came back to give thanks, the other 9 did not. Jesus gave a blessing to the one who returned, but he did not take away the gift of healing for the other 9. He did not stop reaching out to marginalized groups because they did not thank him. He did not judge what they did with their healing. Maybe they went out to sin, to drink to excess, to hurt others. Maybe the few dollars I give to the person on the street corner will go to drinking or drugs. Maybe it will go to food or necessities. Either way, our call is to give, to care, not to judge. Does that mean we shouldn't have boundaries? Absolutely not. Healthy boundaries are incredibly important. We are not asked to place ourselves in harm's way. We are not required to endanger our family's well-being. During one of the last big snows last year, I opened our blinds and saw that our car door was open. I went out, dreading all the snow that I had envisioned piled up inside the car. What I did not anticipate was that someone would still be in my car, rifling through for change. I did not anticipate that it would be too late to turn around unseen. And I did not anticipate the apologies that immediately started flowing from this unhoused individual. Not that he was in my car, but that he scared me. He was desperately sorry that I was afraid when he first stood up out of the car, and I was. I had no idea if he had a gun, if he was violent, if he was high. But I quickly saw that he was none of those, and I offered to go back into the house and get him a few things. He started following me, and I had to set a boundary. I needed him to stay where he was, and I told him so. I gathered some food, hot hands, water, and $10 to ride the bus all day. I gave all of that to him in a bag and pointed in the direction of the closest bus stop. I've replayed the interaction in my mind 100 times. There are probably a million ways that I could have done more, been kinder, asked his name and said it out loud, shook his hand. But I was startled, and I needed the boundary. The bottom line of all of this is that we're handed an opportunity every time we encounter an individual who's unhoused. We have an opportunity to recognize that due to circumstances, perhaps of their own making, and perhaps not, they are in unfortunate positions. They are, however, still human, still children of God, still our brothers and sisters, and still worthy of dignity and respect. Still worthy of making their own decisions and being provided with support. We are called to help, to not judge, to give regardless of a response that we would like to get. And even when putting boundaries in place, we can recognize individuals' humanity and dignity. We have this opportunity in one-to-one encounters. We also have opportunities to help in more systematic ways. For example, in Chicago, I was introduced to a program called Chicago Shares. Churches purchase vouchers to sell to parishioners. The parishioners give those vouchers out to the homeless they encounter, and the homeless can then redeem those vouchers at designated locations for food and necessities. The stores then call in how many vouchers were redeemed and receive a check for that amount. There's no loss to the stores to participate. I'd love to think about how MPB as a parish community might be able to respond in a supportive way, and how we can support each other in our one-to-one daily encounters. Thanks for having me here tonight, and I look forward to our discussion. I'll turn things over to Connor Boyle now.
You're going to hear a similar message, I think, with this, but a little bit of a different take. Joe, I want to thank you for showing up tonight. It's really cold, and you still made it worth your time, and you think that this is worth your time to be here. I really appreciate that. My name is Connor Boyle, and I'm a parishioner here at MPB. I also have the opportunity to teach history to 6th, 7th, and 8th graders here at MPB. And most importantly, I am a father of two wonderful boys that attend MPB. Isaac is a kindergartner in Miss H's class, and Sawyer is in Miss Haling's 3rd grade class. Before I get too deep into this talk, though, I need to tell you a bit more about my family. My parents over there are both one of 8. They are from a model, large Catholic family. Both the elder children in the Boyle family and the Hayes family are named Patrick and Michael. Both of them. They didn't even talk about it before. They both lived in their formative years in Colorado Springs. So if you ever lived there, you likely ran into a Boyle or a Hayes. You can recognize our laughs in crowds or our voices because we're not known for our ability to control the volume of our voices. It's a joyful volume, not an angry volume. When the families get together, we do things that embarrass anyone who marries into our family. We perform. We have Christmas sing-alongs. The next one is scheduled for December 17th. And we take songs sometimes and we change the lyrics to fit our purpose. So when we have birthdays or any other anniversaries, gatherings, we sing. You'll see different instruments from a mandolin, ukulele, organ, piano, guitar, and of course, mediocre voices. My wife, she hates this. Deep down, I know she really does admire us and definitely wishes her family was as fun as ours, but she still talks about the anxiety she feels every time we get together. Other important characteristics to note about our family is that we're often moved to tears. As Grandpa Hayes says, it's the Holy Spirit on our shoulders. And I will warn you now, the Holy Spirit is here with us tonight. Now, the talk has to get a little real here, and a little bit uncomfortable. I took a moment to illustrate the joyful, loving family that I come from. But as you all know, there are moments of stress, sorrow, frustration, and fear that make those moments of joy that much sweeter. We like to come up with solutions right away. We like to be helpful. We want to take away the sorrow and the pain of our family members, but it is rarely that easy, even in a family as joyful as ours. My cousin Nate is a part of this joyful family. Nate grew up with two loving parents. His mom is a PhD in psychology, and dad has a master's degree in social work. Nate has an older brother who graduated from the University of Denver, and a younger brother completing a degree at Colorado College. Nate never really liked school, though. He never felt that he belonged there. His parents began evaluations and interventions early. They uncovered an ADHD diagnosis as well as gifted abilities, especially in math. They began therapy and interventions immediately. As he grew older and continued to experience rejection in school, his parents sent him to various programs from Los Angeles, California, to St. George, Utah. These programs were meant to help develop independence, job skills, education, and a sense of self-confidence. They isolated Nate from tempters and temptations to use drugs and alcohol. They did this until he returned to Colorado Springs. My uncle reflects on this time with the greatest regret. He wonders if the constant program changes and focusing on interventions led to my cousin's feeling that he was broken. He wonders if they started some sort of medical therapy to treat the ADHD earlier, might that have given my cousin a more stable footing. All of these interventions cost their family over $100,000. Apparently, that still wasn't enough. Nate was living with his parents, and he broke the house rules one winter. He had a choice, and Nate chose to pack his bag and hit the bitter cold streets just 3 days before he turned 18. As a parent or a sibling, I want you to take a moment to think about this. The questions you might have in your head about what could have been done differently. Questions about what should be done now that he is on the street. And mentally preparing for the very real possibility that you will receive a call from the police late one night informing you that your loved one has died, or maybe seeing your loved one in a lifeless heap on the street. This was the dreaded reality for my uncle and aunt, and everyone in our joy-filled family to some degree. Two people with advanced degrees dedicated to helping people recover, survive, and avoid the problems now reeling to find answers and ways to save their own son. My uncle relates a story that highlights the complicated feelings of helplessness and fear that Elizabeth spoke of. My late Grandpa Hayes wanted to treat his kids to dinner in old Colorado City. They were all gathered around a table while the waiter was taking their drink orders. And my uncle sees Nate walking across the window in front of the restaurant. He freezes. He doesn't know what he should do in this moment. Nate made a choice, but certainly he was cold and hungry. What if he was high? I think that indecision that he felt in that moment is what we all face when we encounter people who are experiencing homelessness. We want to help, but we don't know how. I spoke to Nate about this terrible time in his life. Nate is a soft-spoken man of few words. His words are not polished. which might seem rude to some, but they are authentic. He does not speak to impress or convince. The conversation is raw. As we started to talk, he said he didn't want to scare me with some of the stories of life on the streets, but I asked him to share what he was comfortable with sharing anyway. He told me the first about a typical day for him living on the streets. It started with waking up incredibly early to find food, then return to camp, break it down, and find another place to go, because there were always limits to how long he could be anywhere. It was a constant reminder of how unwanted he felt, forced to move regardless of whether he was sick or injured. This is a tough way to live, especially when he was alone most of the time. Then he told a heartbreaking story about his last few days on the street. He developed frostbite in his toes, and he had to go to the emergency room. He thought he finally had a friend to watch over his camp while he was being treated at the hospital. But when he returned, all his stuff was gone. He had been betrayed in a moment of desperation. This betrayal and the pain of frostbite, he says, broke him. He returned to his childhood home like the prodigal son. Nate has held a variety of jobs since his return home. He's lived in halfway houses, rental apartments, and he is now living with my uncle again and his girlfriend, and until he can find affordable housing near the landscaping business he's currently working for. His furniture is stored in my grandma's garage until he finds a new place. And he tells me he's been sober for several months. He feels like he's in a good place. But my aunt and uncle and the rest of the family are cautiously optimistic. They know that he can backslide in a moment of weakness, and they are always prepared for the dreaded relapse. I asked my uncle to reflect more broadly on the issues of people experiencing homelessness, and he paused, which in my family is scary because we're a bunch of talkers and we don't usually take much breath between words. He said, he humbly started by saying, I don't have a clear answer. I always feel like I might be missing something. And it's hard to come up with solutions when you're basing decisions on incomplete and ever-changing facts. There's a lot of wisdom in that for us tonight. He pointed out that Nate and people experiencing homelessness experience toxic doses of rejection and betrayal regularly. Every human interaction, he said, when living on the streets can lead to betrayal, from police officers to bystanders to the fellow person on the street. He said that kindness is seen as a trap for later betrayal. Let me say that again. Kindness is a trap for later betrayal. This is a bleak world to live in, with serious psychological ramifications for even the most stable of individuals, let alone people who are wrestling with addiction or mental health. So here we are, faced with the injustice of poverty in our own community. We are uncomfortable when we see people in pain. We want that discomfort to go away. We also happen to be a church and a school family with a higher calling, to minister to people that don't have a place to stay, people like my cousin Nate. These people may not have as much support as Nate does. Maybe they had more, we can't say for sure, and it isn't appropriate to assess in that moment. We must start simply. Recognize that we are uncomfortable. We don't have all the answers, and that's okay. We need to center ourselves in the example of Christ, who acted with compassion first, who saw those suffering as his family. Never refer to the unhoused as objects or problems, and when we do, correct it. We are called to be uncomfortable when we see injustice. As I said in the beginning, we have to show up. We have to keep the conversation going. I've been talking for a while, but I'm not done yet. I need you to agree to be uncomfortable for a moment and raise your hands when I prompt you. So I believe I heard Father Pat once say, and I'm sure many other folks have said it, but God doesn't give us something we can't handle, and Father Pat always emphasized alone. So the idea is we can't do this alone. So by the looks of it, we're not alone tonight. We're going to solve this problem. We aren't going to solve this problem of poverty on a regimented timetable which is going to freak some people out. Some of you, you know I'm talking about the checklist people. Are there any of you who like checklists and like to have things done, keeping it orderly? Okay, that's not me, that's my wife. Okay, but then there's people like me who are flexible and comfortable with the chaos. We need you. Are there people who are comfortable with the chaos? Good. We definitely need you. Okay, how about those empaths, those who feel everything and are affected by everything? And those who don't let those pesky emotions get in the way, because we're going to make decisions on debit, by God. There's a couple out there, yes. We need you. Those who went to Ivy Leagues or schools, or the School of Hard Knocks and any schools in between. We need you. Those who are young or feel young. Those who are old. We need you. Those who like to focus on the details. Some of you out there, I hope, or we're in trouble, are those who are big picture thinkers. We need you. Those who love technology and those who fear technology. We need you. Those who are feeling nervous and those who are feeling brave. We need you. I look at those who have to make the decisions within our community and how different they are. Colleen, Mary, and Father Daniel. I think they're making proactive and informed decisions. We're seeing the results of this every day around the school. I feel safe being here, and I feel safe having my children learn here. I know that we're going to make mistakes. We will apologize for them, and we will learn from them. Humanity can be pretty messy, but God thinks we are worth the struggle, all of us. I want to leave you with this provocative passage from a letter written by Thomas Merton, and I believe this should guide our next steps as we move forward. Do not depend on the hope of results. When you are doing the sort of work you have taken on, essentially an apostolic work, you may have to face the fact that your work will be apparently worthless and even achieve no result at all. If not, perhaps results opposite to what you expect. As you get used to this idea, you start more and more to concentrate, not on the results, but on the value, the rightness, the truth of the work itself. And there too, a great deal has to be gone through, as gradually you struggle less and less for an idea and more for specific people. The range tends to narrow, but it gets much more real. In the end, it is the reality of personal relationships that saves everything. When you see one of our unhoused brothers and sisters, please think of my cousin Nick. See them as part of your family. We are called to be uncomfortable in the face of injustice. Never settle when you witness human suffering. We are called to do something to advance justice, no matter how small the action is. Let us start simply. Let us stay rooted in the example of Christ, and let us do it together. Amen.
Amen.
If you wake up your computer, be closer to the mic than you think you need to be.
Great. I'll just hold it. How about that? Can everyone hear? Great. Awesome. Well, thank you to Father for inviting us to come talk. Thank you to Elizabeth and Connor for sharing your your stories and your expertise with everybody. Thank you to everybody that came. We're excited to be here. My name is Michaela, and I am a first-year missionary with Christ in the City, and I grew up in Colorado. Before college, I lived in Highlands Ranch, south of Denver, and then after that, my family moved to Westminster, so south and north of Denver, but I've spent pretty much my whole life in Colorado.
And my name is Brogan. I am a second-year missionary from Lake Charles, Louisiana. So definitely not from Colorado. Don't really know much about anything around here until I came. But very happy to be here and to spread our mission and message with y'all tonight. So.
Awesome. So quick show of hands. Who in the room has heard of Christ in the City before? Awesome. How many of you know kind of what Christ in the City is? Fewer hands. Okay, cool. So basically, Christ in the City is first and foremost a Catholic formation program for young adults, and it's also a missionary program. So our apostolate is homeless ministry, as Father Daniel mentioned earlier. We work very closely with the homeless population in Denver, Colorado. Basically, our mission is to know, love, and serve the poor, and the poor that we specifically target is homelessness. So this is our community here. Christ in the City, as I mentioned, is a young adult program, and so the 34 of us missionaries live in community together. We cook, we clean, we pray, we eat meals, we do everything together. And this is kind of where our ministry starts, is learning how to love and serve the people that we live with, which I'm sure some of you have experienced living with family or friends throughout your life. That can sometimes be the hardest people to love. So we learn how to love in this community, and then we take that to the streets with us. And Brogan's going to talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, so kind of what I've gathered, the big point of tonight is going to be like how can we go out and actually impact the community, impact the poor, how we do it. And we understand not everyone can do it this way, but we go out 3 to 4 days a week in street teams. So the 34 of us were broken up into teams of 4 to 6, and we go to the same area of downtown Denver. Every day we go out, and that allows us to actually encounter just about the same groups of people and actually develop stronger, deeper relationships with them, and actually, grow in relationship in the hopes of walking with them and overcoming this cycle of poverty. We also host a lunch every single Wednesday, no matter the weather. We're always there, and every second Saturday of the month. We call it our lunch in the park. We invite all of our friends all around. We have people that go out, invite people in, and it's just a place to like share in community, bring our community to our friends on the street, and cultivate that community. And so we're about to show a video right quick. It's going to be a brief intro into a little bit more of our mission, and then we'll go into some more details after that.
What's more dangerous than smoking 15 cigarettes a day? What's more lethal than obesity, alcoholism, and a lack of exercise? Hidden in the corners of our cities and behind unseen eyes is a poverty of loneliness, which reaches its tragic peak in a demographic that often goes unnoticed: the homeless. We can easily see material poverty, the need for housing, food, and employment. But at the root of this problem runs a deep poverty of loneliness, the need for friendship, support, and human connection. Often without jobs, family, or other social spheres, the homeless are among the most vulnerable to depression and despair. In our midst are the poorest of the poor, not only materially, but socially as well. But there is hope. The cycle of poverty can be broken by the simple strength of human connection. At Christ in the City, we seek out the homelessness in order to break down that barrier of isolation, which is usually the biggest obstacle between a person on the street and their desire to live a full and fruitful life. Healing for our homeless friends and our society at large doesn't happen without relationship. That's why Christ in the City missionaries walk the same streets in the same city several times a week, all year long. We go out with no agenda other than building that human connection, meeting the homeless in friendship. We approach people with a willingness to listen, seeing them as a person to be loved and not a problem to be fixed. This catches many of the homeless off guard at first because they are living in survival mode, constantly alert for potential threats. Encounter and relationship is not a one-time event. We walk the city over and over, simply listening, loving, and being present to those we meet. In time, trust is built, and that friendship opens the door to a better understanding of their own dignity. That human connection is the catalyst for our homeless friends to take advantage of housing, sobriety programs, and job opportunities, to overcome the depression and loneliness that is often so paralyzing. As our friends recognize that they are worthy of being loved and capable of maintaining relationships, they often begin to reconnect with family and start a journey of healing that changes the course of their lives. Imagine if every city had not only soup kitchens and shelters, but people who were there just to help the homeless know they have a home in us. And what is a home but a small taste of Christ's infinite love? And what is love but being fully seen, known, and valued? Join us as we seek to truly see each person on our streets and bring the love of Christ in the city.
Yes, so with that, I'm pretty sure a lot of questions are coming up. What does this look like for y'all? What does this look like for us? But before we actually get into that, I just wanted to kind of invite you onto an activity right quick. So if you don't mind just closing your eyes and just processing the things I'm saying and try to, the experiment's gonna like get you into the shoes of our friends. So imagine something happens in your life, and whether it's losing your job, getting a divorce, getting an injury, and you just find yourself on the streets. And in the midst of like that loneliness, that dark time, who do you reach out to? So just take a minute and make a list of people in your mind that you know you could pick up the phone, give them a call, and they're going to be there to help you out in that situation. Okay, so can someone just like throw out some names of some people you thought of off the top of your head, just in those 20 seconds? So we try to do this little experiment with people when they come in and come to volunteer with us, and those are a lot of the common names that get thrown out: moms, dads, siblings, friends. And the harsh reality of that is, like, our friends on the street, they don't have that. Part of the reason why they are on the street is because they don't have that person they can call for whatever reason, whether it's they got in a fight with their brother and their relationship's too broken, they can't turn back to it. Or I've met people that just owe people money and are scared of what's going to happen if they reach out. So things like that. And when there's no one to turn to, this can be a result of those relationships. And I think in the core of homelessness is this rupture of relationship, this lack of someone to turn to in your times of need. And yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I'm going to share just a little bit of my experience growing up in Denver that hopefully some of you can relate to living in this area. So as I shared earlier, I grew up in the suburbs south of Denver, and especially when I got to kind of the high school age where friends and I were going downtown to go get dinner or going to watch the fireworks on New Year's or whatever it might be, the advice that we were kind of greeted with before going out was, hey, be careful when you're going out and when you're going into Denver, usually from parents or friends' parents. Oftentimes things like, hey, be careful, there's dangerous people in Denver, or hey, watch out for the homeless. They're unpredictable, you never know what's gonna happen. And honestly, I can't fault any of the parents and any of the people that kind of prepped us with that advice, because the truth is we don't ever truly know what's gonna happen. But as it's been mentioned already a few times tonight, the reality is these people are people too, they're humans too, and they also want to be known and loved just like each of us do. And so I think, yeah, we just want to invite you to kind of challenge some of your perspectives, or just see what new things you think of, new things you experience after tonight. And I think Connor and Elizabeth also kind of touched on this with some of their experiences with Nate or with the other people that you experienced. And yeah, we just want to invite you to kind of this new understanding possibly of homelessness and kind of what that might look like.
And on that note, I wanted to share just a little story about one of my really good friends from this past year, and her name is T. She's a woman of, she grew up in foster care. She had 17 brothers and sisters in her house. But she grew up in a small town in Ohio, and basically, besides being in foster care, she had a great life. Parents loved her. All of her siblings, they worked around the farm, which helped out. One of her favorite things, and one of the things me and her really connected on, was getting to cook. I'm from Louisiana, so I love to cook. But yeah, so one day, the thought came up, like, how did T become homeless? And it was something I kind of wrestled with for probably about a month before I actually got the courage to ask her. I was like, T, what happened? And very similar to the story of Nate, is she got caught up in the cycle of, I think it was around high school. She started using drugs, and her family just didn't want a part of that. And she made the decision to stick with using drugs and kind of separate herself from her family, but she didn't have anyone to turn to. And at the time that I met her, she had been on the streets for, I think, 6 years. She's about 28, I think. And yeah, I asked her, I was like, why did you make that decision, and why are you still out here? And she kept coming back to, I don't have anyone else to turn to. Me and my team last year, we had the great pleasure of walking with her. We actually met her our second day going on the streets. And yeah, she's been through a lot of ups and downs, but she's now back in touch with her mom, her aunt, and she's sadly in a long-term living facility, but she does have those relationships back, and that's kind of our role as missionaries and working with our friends.
Awesome. So as you probably heard in Brogan's story about T and in Connor's story about his cousin Nate, oftentimes this lack of relationships that individuals who are living on the streets experience typically leads to this deep isolation and loneliness. And I think if we're all truly honest with ourselves, we all experience isolation and loneliness to differing degrees throughout our lives, whether that's in school growing up or in family, whatever it might be. But the sad reality is that our friends on the streets experience this poverty of loneliness to just a very larger degree than a lot of us do, because of this lack of relationship, this lack of human connection that they encounter pretty much every day of their lives.
Yeah, and we've heard it a lot tonight, both in our talk. It's kind of a very common theme of loneliness, and in both the other presentations. But this poverty of loneliness it's a universal thing. We all experience it, whether that's just in your day-to-day life and decisions at home. You don't want to do something, you can feel isolated and alone in that. So understanding that, where we're coming from, that's our role as missionaries, is to encounter our friends in that loneliness. Quite literally, of actually walking up the tents and being in that uncomfortable position of seeking someone out in that loneliness, in that poverty. And it's a very difficult thing. It's I always feel a little anxious every time I go out, whenever I haven't been out a few times, but it's a really beautiful thing when you can actually encounter someone in that brokenness. And what I found, me and Michaela were actually talking about today, our friends really bring out our own brokenness in ourselves. And I think that just shows that, yeah, our friends are just people, and they want to be loved, they want to be known, they want to be seen. And sometimes it takes meeting them in the lowest of lows to really see that and grow in that. And I'm assuming from that, as our mission is going out and just making friends with people, the question comes up of, does our ministry matter? Does it actually impact people? Like, what's it doing to help people get off the streets? And yeah, I mean, if we're trying to feed, house, clothe people, we're doing a terrible job. And that's the reality of it. but that's not our mission. Our mission is to rebuild those relationships, like men that rupture a relationship that we've talked about. And what I've noticed, been here for almost a year and a half now, when you get to walk with people in that brokenness and heal them, and just by loving them and seeing them as Christ does, it gives people this belief in themselves to actually do the things they need to get back on their feet and actually walk towards a better life. I have several friends, not going to go into details, I could talk on and about this, but I have several friends that are now like on their way to getting into housing. One of my friends actually is getting custody of his daughter. So beautiful things that just come from seeking out them in their brokenness and just loving them as Christ would.
Awesome. So this has been a lot about kind of what we do, what it looks like. We're going to talk a little bit about sort of the logistics of our ministry now. So Jesus ministered to people through relationships, and if we truly want to follow Christ in this way, we are called to also do that. And so how Christ in the City approaches this is through the image of Mary and John at the foot of the cross. So Brogan and I and the other 32 missionaries, a lot of us have graduated from college, but we only have 2 that graduated with social work. So we are not qualified. We are not out there being social workers in this world, but we need social workers in this world. Not everybody's going to be called to take a year or 2 of their lives and walk the streets of Denver, but we were called to do that. And so I think it was Connor that was saying, like, we need everybody in this, whether that's the missionaries, the social workers, the people that just care about people. All of us kind of make this, I don't know, like unified pack, I guess. But yeah, we talk a lot about Mary and John at the foot of the cross at Christ in the City, and this is kind of the model for our whole relationship-based ministry. So I'm sure Mary and John, when Jesus was being crucified, wanted to like be able to take away his physical pain. I'm sure they wanted to take him off the cross, heal his wounds, but that's not what they were called to. And we are also not called to fix our friends' problems. So Christ in the City missionaries specifically are called to walk with our friends in these different crosses that they carry. You heard Brogan talk about it with T. You heard Connor talk about it with his cousin. But yes, we're called to kind of walk alongside them in their suffering and be that support, be that person for them to turn to, that person for them to lean on. But we obviously can't fix these problems for them. Yeah, which is, I guess, why Mary and John are such a perfect image for this for us.
So now it's just some brief practicals and like things that y'all can do. As not giving up a year of your life, but just in your day-to-day. Yeah, so we actually have some pamphlets at our table over here. On the back side, they have some instructions and how-tos on how to make care kits. These are things we keep in all of our vans and vehicles, and basically anytime we come to a red light and there's a homeless person sitting on the side of the road, what we do is roll in the window, ask the person their name. I think that's the first thing and the most important thing. One thing, someone once told me like they hadn't heard their name in over a month, and I know some people have even been longer, but just the value and the depth in asking someone their name. Yeah. And in these care kits, there's also like a list of what's in them. There are basically necessities, anything from socks, hand warmers, toothpaste, snacks, things like that. Especially in the winter months, socks, hand warmers are huge. And yeah, anyone needs them. Everyone needs them. So if that's something you're interested in, please pick one up on your way out, or just come and talk to us. We'd love to talk more about it. Other thing, this is a challenge I have for all of y'all. Say hello to someone new, whether that's at a stoplight, asking someone their name, on your way to work, you walk by someone, whether it's even that person at work that you just kind of don't really get along with, or you think you might be different, seek them out. There's so much beauty and depth in that of seeking out the other, in a place that you normally wouldn't. So it's a challenge. I hope y'all will accept it. And the last thing is pray for our homeless friends. We also have some stickers. Sure, that's one. So these stickers, they're the hand of Christ, and they have all of the names of all of our friends, not all of our friends, most of our friends, written on there. You can pray for them very intentionally that way. I think T's name's on there. Also, other thing, T's birthday is Saturday, so please pray for it. And last thing, we also have these pamphlets, which are for opportunities to volunteer. They are for Lunch in the Park. Have a little bit more details of every Wednesday and second Saturday, the address to the park, and kind of what it would look like if you were to come volunteer with us. Also, we'll be here after. I'd love to talk more about it.
One last thing, we also have a sign up at the table with Shayla. Everyone say hi, Shayla. And she has a sign up over there. So if you are interested in learning more about Christ in the City, volunteering with us, anything, just want to get more information, I think it's name and email. You can just write it down in there, and then we will get in touch with you if that's easier as well. So, yeah.
Round of applause, thank you. If you are a part of any group at this parish that concerns itself with the promotion of justice, go ahead and raise your hand. Great, so a number. It's a beautiful gift. It's a rich part of our Catholic tradition to be about what we call Catholic social teaching. And the notion of justice is giving everybody what is their due, right? Ultimately, that's dignity, that's respect, it's love, but then providing for the material and the spiritual needs of those whom the Lord puts in our way. Something that even if you don't have your blessing bags or care kits ready, that would be a wonderful project for us to take up as a parish, and to just draw more people from the parish into a very simple task. But even to just roll down the window when you come to the side of the road, whatever you're comfortable with, and just say, hey, what's your name? Jeremy, wonderful to meet you. I'm Father Daniel, I'm Sarah, I'm Johnny. I'll pray for you. And if you just try that by itself, that humanizing interaction, it's actually a mutually humanizing interaction. You encounter the other person as lovable, as beloved, and it actually draws something out of you and me. I can tell you I keep a stash of fives in my car, and it's harder to have that conversation when I don't have money to give them. Because it's like all I have is kind of the poverty of my own humanity, and it's even less transactional than just like, here's this $5, I hope it blesses you. It's like, I hope my eye contact and my smile and my name and my receiving of your name, I hope that blesses you. And so just as a practical way, again, if you're comfortable with such a beautiful and tough and awkward interaction, it's a really great first start. And be careful with first starts in God, because he'll sweep you off your feet and take you to some crazy, beautiful places. I'm gonna pick on Dave and Ann real quick. If you both would come up. You're our parishioners, and you have worked with Christ in the City, and you've actually walked with an individual. Yeah, I am going to pick on you. Come on, Ann. You have walked with an individual, meeting them from the point of homelessness and walking that individual into housing. And I just want one or both of you to just give a 2-minute spiel on your experience of working with Christ in the City, but also just kind of being drawn into the work and journeying with one person in particular. So I'm sorry and thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the forewarning. We appreciate that. Hi, my name is Dave Graham. My wife Ann. I guess I'm more comfortable with public speaking, but Ann does all the heavy work, so make sure to give her the credit. So we first got and then also in New York City, so I'm pretty involved. And Ann's a regular at Lunch in the Park. And yeah, I just pick up on some of the thoughts we're given, which is one of the impressions that made on me. I'm frankly comfortable speaking in front of big groups of people, but not always so comfortable even just in one-on-one interactions, but just made a big impression on me in terms of just, what I do try to do is when I encounter homeless people, whether it be here or I travel around the country, different cities. I was in Durham about a month ago, and coming back from dinner, had several people that encountered us, coming back from dinner in the hotel, and just try to keep in mind those lessons from Christ in the City about, putting out a handshake, using people's names, introducing myself. To my surprise, once I've gotten to, use the lessons from Christ in the City, I've never had a negative interaction actually with a homeless person. Maybe that's, being a relatively tall, male, maybe, I feel safer doing that. But I've never been, threatened or things like that. So that's part of my journey. And also, I think maybe what Father Dana was referring to is that, really through Ann and our daughter Gabby, they befriended somebody who was, on the streets, went through some tough times, and we really tried to make him, almost part of the extended family, and take him to events and things like that. Me had been over to our house several times. Normally comes over for Christmas holiday as well. So, Ann, what would you
Well, first of all, Dave warned me that Father Daniel would do this, and I said, no, he won't. Here we are. We'll have to talk about that later. And Dave is right, yeah, he's much more comfortable speaking than I am. But yeah, Christ in the City for me has been a huge blessing. I go regularly to Lunch in the Park, and I've taken a lot of people recently, and I really like to think of it as like a family reunion. Like we just kind of sit much like this amongst one another and just talk. I mean, it's not, some people are called to serve along the lunch line. I don't usually do that. I usually just kind of try to interact with one or two people. One fella that we have befriended, I say he's my brother from another mother. It's just kind of, we've known each other for about 10 years. It's not always pretty. Sometimes we fight like siblings. Sometimes we enjoy each other's company. I was really blessed to be able to walk with him with housing, and you talk about not having, Broden brought up, who would you call if you were in that crisis? And when this fella got the call that he had housing, he had no one to call. So he called me, and we kind of did the journey of, getting him into housing. So that day that he called, it was like, I've got a house, they have an apartment. So it's like, oh, okay. So, you go and you get all the stuff, and we go over to the apartment building, and for the full day, we carried around this huge portrait of his mom, and the mom sat, and the big portrait of the mother was in the back seat, and Art and I are in the front seat. And we get to the place, and you can tell the woman was like, what's your relationship? Who are you to each other and stuff? And you realize it's just like, we're just friends. It's not like, I get to go home to a really nice house and a wonderful family. But in that moment, for me, Art was just a friend, someone to walk with and journey with. And it didn't go well. It went really poorly. He was called he got the call, he got housing. He was missing a document. And so it's like, that was it. He just had this big explosion. And, I said, well, what do we need to do? So, okay, we need to go to the doctor's office, get a form signed, so we go down there. That wasn't pretty either. That was like another big explosion, And the story of that is just sort of like, we didn't have someone to really walk with him. He would have lost that housing. So it's really just kind of trying to be present, I think, in those little moments. And, him and I have had a lot of little moments that have
bless our family. So I would encourage you to go to lunch in the park. You know, encourage you just to look at it as like a family reunion. Just go to sit and meet someone and just be present in that like 1 hour. You know, you'll be really blessed, I think. So hopefully that helps. And yeah.
Jesus never promised that we would be comfortable. Beautiful. So thank you tonight for just your time. If you come to this with kind of religious intentions, thank you. If you come just out of goodwill, you're a neighbor, you're not particularly religious, you might also think about what is the next step for you, whether it's partnering with this parish, partnering with another ministry, or doing your own, again, just humanizing another fellow human and being about that good work, benevolence, that goodwill towards others. In our Catholic faith, most every weekend we say, glory to God in the highest and peace to people of goodwill. And that goodwill is benevolence. And so we try to be a people of goodwill. One last reflection for you. In the Byzantine version of the meal blessing, it starts off, may the poor eat and be satisfied, may those who seek the face of the Lord rejoice, and may their hearts find life. That notion of our hearts finding life applies to all of us. For we all deal with a certain level of loneliness. We all deal with elements of rejection and relational difficulty. And so we are all on this journey towards our hearts finding life. Thank you.
Is Christ in the City a interfaith program, or is it a archdiocesan program?
Christ in the City is not formally a part of the Archdiocese, but they're a Catholic program that was started with the Sodlets, with a religious order that's at Holy Name Parish. They're a religious order kind of based out of Peru that came here to Denver, kind of a long story with Archbishop Shapu. So yeah. Any other questions or comments? Or if you have a micro sermon, just kidding. Very good. You can look, we'll be posting a recording of this, as well as looking at some follow-up opportunities within this parish. You can stay in touch with the bulletin, and we will look at follow-up opportunities. But thank you. Have a very safe and warm drive home.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to do divided comment? Oh, yeah. Oh, is that what you're wanting?